And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another week of Divesoft TV. This will be part two of our three-part video series where we are focusing on bailout rebreathers or dual rebreathers. I'm your host. My name is Joe Bosques. And so thanks for joining and tuning in. This week, my guests are Mario Marconi, Edd Sorrenson, and Anthony Tedeschi. So we'll have an exciting week where we're going to have some kind of discussions, and we're going to build on kind of what we what we concluded on about last week. You know, there's a lot of common themes in the way that we dive with multiple rebreathers underwater. So, all right. So let's see if we can get Matt to pipe everybody in. So if you're watching, be sure to like, share, and comment kind of your opinion on diving with multiple rebreathers. All right, let's see if we can get everybody tuned in. All right, look, we got everybody here on one shot. All right. So welcome, Ed, Anthony, Mario.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi all.
All right. Well, we're very happy. I'm really excited to have all of you guys on. Real happy. Thanks for joining us this week. Like I said earlier, you know, we're going to kind of build on what we kind of concluded on about last week. So, but first off, if you guys could go through and introduce yourself to the viewers. So, Ed, we can start with you.
Hi, I'm Edd Sorrenson. I'm the owner of Cave Adventures here in Marianna, Florida.
All right, and Mario.
Hello, I'm Mario Marconi. I'm from Italy. I'm a cave diver since 1999.
All right, and Anthony.
I'm Anthony Tedeschi. I just an active diver. I do commercial diving, engineering consultant professionally, and then this is more of a hobby that I've been doing since I was 16. So
Great.
One of the few, I guess, that are doing it wreck diving, especially in the Northeast, as opposed to strictly cave and overhead.
Right. Yeah. So something that I really wanted to kind of focus on or bring in this week was, you know, folks from diving all over the world and diving in different environments. You know, we often have a lot of cave divers on here, and so it's good to have, you know, folks diving in ocean wrecks and caves as well. So they're actually kind of going back and forth between configurations and the environments. That was kind of the big thing last week was that it really depends on your environment. Your environment will dictate, you know, your configuration of diving with dual rebreathers. Right. You know, Anthony, what kind of configuration do you dive in when you're utilizing dual rebreathers?
So it's been an evolution for me. I started, you know, CCR in a backmount KISS Classic, and then then I was diving when I was down in Florida at college. I was doing a lot of all side mount open circuit stuff, and I just liked that feeling. So I actually started with a home built side mount rebreather, then went with the original Flex to the KISS Sidekick, and then I was running two sidekicks, and now currently I run a back-mounted classic and a sidekick when I run two systems.
Nice. And Mario, I take it that you're diving on the Liberty.
Yes, I start to dive with the rebreather in 2002, and in 2004 I start my first dives with dual rebreather, with a bailout rebreather. At that time I use a jockey, and I had used it in deep cave diving, but of course was not easy to manage that kind of unit in deep cave diving in case of real bailout. And so now I am on twin or double Liberty side mount.
Great, great. Yeah, like an evolution as well.
Yes, it's a mind evolution, because my original idea when I was on back mount Liberty is just to use a side mount Liberty as a bailout rebreather. But during my side mount training, Liberty side mount training, I have seen that probably the best way was to use two Liberty side mount and to have no more bailout rebreather idea, but a fusion system. And so my idea is to consider both CCR, both Liberty, as a single system. This is my philosophy.
Right, right. Yeah, and that was kind of a common theme, was to kind of go into the more holistic system. I know that's something you do, Ed. And so yeah, Ed, tell me about your configuration.
All right. So I was off rebreathers for many years because I had started side mounting only in about 1999, 2000 area. And there was no side mount rebreathers then. And then my friend Bill Gambrill made a original Prism Topaz into a side mount rebreather. So I dove that back in, I think, 4 or 5. And it was nice, but I didn't like it still had over the shoulder counter lungs, or front mounted counter lungs. So squeezing into some of the really, really small stuff, it was just too constrictive still. And I just opted not to go that way. Then in 2009, Mike came out with
So it sounds like your microphone kind of cuts in and out a little bit. So I don't know if you cover it or not. It's worse.
Better?
Try one more time. We'll get it. We'll get it, Ed.
How about now?
The way you had it in the first was was probably the best.
Pretty sure it's right here.
Oh no.
Better? Worse?
Okay, there we go. Looks like we got you. All right, great.
All right. So once he came out with this gem, which was supposed to be a recreational SCR, I actually converted it into a side mount. And but there again, it still had the front mounted counter. So I had it removable. So if I got to really super tight bottle off restrictions, I could take the counter ones and everything off, push it ahead of me, put it back on. Then I didn't really like that. Then the side came out. I was diving the original prototype, which was SCR. Then when they turned it into a CCR, work and breathing was much better. Then the Sidewinder, of course, Mike gave me that project back 5 years ago, and it was originally designed with Sumper. And then I developed it into what it is today. And then you guys, of course, approached me to help with the prototype of the Liberty. And I still thank you for that, because I had a lot of fun doing that. And it's a fantastic side mount rebreather. But for some of our longer explorations, we just got tired of putting bottles every 1,500 feet when you're going 15, 16,000 feet. Now there's some really tight grinder restrictions. There's some bottle off restrictions. So for me, it really had to be super clean, super low profile. There was places where we were in low areas and it was complete mud underneath us. So it wasn't clean, and you weren't able to keep excellent buoyancy control, and you were going to become. So I started with the side kick and the sidewinder, but then I didn't have redundancy. I had an 85 on my right, my side kick on my left, and my sidewinder above that. The Liberty gave me that complete redundancy, and the more and more I dove it, the better it got. And I've been diving that with the Sidewinder for the Dual Rebreather stuff now for about 3 years. Did a lot of stuff with Brian over when I taught him his Liberty Sidemount crossover. Remember when that was? I think 18, 19, something like that. But anyway, so now it's pretty much all the dives have been the Liberty and an 85 and the Sidewinder. So anything my chest can fit through, I can scrape through with Dual Rebreathers. So it's really been working out quite well for me.
So, unfortunately, there was a little bit of kind of audio. Maybe every time you were getting a notification on your phone, it would kind of cut out. But to kind of piece everything together, like you've been in an evolutionary process as well. But it sounds like you're really happy with the Sidewinder as your unit, and then you have the Liberty Sidemount, and then you have a low pressure 85. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's. Last week we talked about having that open circuit transitional gas, and this seems to really kind of check all the boxes as well.
Well, and that's the thing is when you're transitioning, a lot of things can go wrong. I just taught the very first ever dual rebreather class a week ago. So a lot of skills and drills that I came up with over the last, I've been working on this for over 2 years. Were things that have happened during. So, you're going through stuff that small, things happen. Back when I was doing the exploration in 9,000 feet back, coming through a grinder at 180 feet deep in zero visibility, and I had, one of the units flood. So, things happen. When you go to switch, and all of a sudden I recommend people exhale first when they're switching units. In case there's been a flood, hopefully you'll hear gurgling. In this particular case, I did not, and the ADV had a problem, so it was all on the inhale side. But when you get a caustic, you don't have a lung full of gas. Your brain wants you to breathe, and you have nothing to breathe. So you really should go to, a couple of, sandy breaths, but you need a couple of breaths of gas before you transition to your next unit. In the course, I call it a source or unit and a destination unit. I don't like the term primary and bailout. I don't believe in bailout rebreathers personally. I switch about every 15 minutes, and also if I've had serious step changes over about 10 or 15 feet, then I'm going to also switch just to make sure that the PO2s get kept close together. But if you start to get PO2 hit, you're going to need to get that breathing under control. You're going to need a couple of breaths. If you get a caustic, and you don't have a breath, you're going to need a couple of breaths before you move to your destination unit. Or if you get to your destination unit and that's got a problem, you're going to need a couple of breaths to get back onto what is now your destination, back to your source unit or active unit. So I'm a firm believer in, plus I need suit inflation, wing inflation. I don't want to run that off my 2-liter bottles, because then you're going to run out of gas.
Right. That's that transition gas you're running off of your bailout bottle, and it's the transition gas. Like you said, if you have a caustic or a flood, you need to be able to move quickly, and if you jump to another rebreather, it may not be able to get your breathing under control properly. So Tony, or Anthony, what's your experience with ocean diving with dual rebreathers? Do you have a transition gas as well in this configuration? Do you have a open circuit bailout the entire way, or do you have enough open circuit bailout to swap between units?
So I watched the last week's episode, and I agree completely. You need some kind of transition gas. And I kind of came up with on my own which is a decent amount of time of like around a 10-minute window at my deepest depth is what I, have with me. And for the ocean, not only for the transition between the units, but also if the boat gets pulled off from the wreck or you can't make it back to the line, you also need gas to send up a lift bag to make your own permanent upline, because we tie into the wrecks. All our stuff is far offshore. Anything deep where it requires, or where I start using the bailout rebreather, we're 100 to plus miles away from land. So we don't do any kind of drip diving, anything like that up here. So I have, I usually jack up a low pressure 45 for stuff about 250 is my cutoff there. And then I'll change over to like an 80 or, something larger. And then I also have like a 70% bottle hanging about 70 feet or so from the boat. So in case something happens during the deco, with just gives you extra options to plug in gas, because that's really the only way to stage it without having to bring it with you. Sometimes if it's a wreck where there's current or there's a bigger potential of not making it back, that other bottle will come with me. But it just prevents from having to carry so much with us, because we can't leave it anywhere. With the wreck diving. But I agree, you need transition gas for the sanity breath. Even just if you got to come off your loop, something seems off, just like you would without a dual system. And it's funny, everybody's like bailout rebreathers dual, and my dives bottom times compared to my wreck diving compared to cave diving are a lot shorter. So we need something, or I need something that, once I start pushing, 25 plus minutes over 250 or so on a wreck, which is a longer dive, you just can't. And, we have dive buddies, and I believe, it's good to have a dive buddy, but I'm completely independent. If I don't plan to use that person for anything. So once basically where it really shines in the wreck diving open water, in my opinion, is kind of that 270 mark is where you kind of just have to you need the dual systems, because you're carrying 480s or more. It's hard to get off the boat. You can't jump in and clip things off like you can in a cave, or, because you got a lot of times those wrecks, sometimes you're jump in, hit the trigger on the scooter, because you got to get down to, below 30 to 70 feet because the current's ripping on the surface. So yeah, that's, I definitely carry a transition gas. And there's also options, like Ed mentioned, I run with my dual units, my back mount unit, the dill side feeds my wing on my main rebreather, and it also feeds the ADD on the backup rebreather. But I can plug in, if needed, that offboard gas to either system, or to my suit, or to my wing. So it gives you a lot of redundancy options. And then both units have their own oxygen, which also can be shared across units with, the Omni Swivel quick disconnects if needed to be. So trying to do all that. And, I'm a big believer in, a BOV on the primary. So it's just a click switch over, and then that also becomes a glass block, to use things. Yeah. I try to, I keep it simple, but have the options without a lot of equipment to crisscross things, so there's extra redundancy built in. But I think both, you need two independent systems. Like I said, I share the one gas, but it's not, if I lose that one gas, I have another gas that I can feed either unit with, and they both have their own oxygen.
Right, and that's something that we haven't talked a lot about, is kind of the offboard pluggability, and basically able to move gas from a unit to another unit, or from your open circuit transition gas you can plug into either unit if it needs. You can, like you said, you have a 70 feet, you got a 50-50 hanging, and so you can plug into that for whatever you need. And it's more options. And so, which that's I think that's always a very good philosophy. And with the BOV, that gives you that immediate switch if you go from a back mount unit, and that switch gives you that quick transition gas feed. And so versus with like a lot of others that are diving with two side mount units, they don't have an integrated bailout valve into the mouthpiece, so they have to have a second stage pretty close by.
Yeah. And one point too that Ed had mentioned, and they kind of mentioned last week, is I call it a bailout rebreather, but I don't tend to go to that unit and test it out except for like my pre-jump, and then I might on deco, or I'm like in a tight area where I might think something was affected. But in my cave diving, I used it in my like build up protocols. I was cave diving with it, but something there where you're longer, much deeper penetrations and away, and the dives are a lot longer, I would definitely be switching back and forth to make sure the integrity was right on the units. Where in the ocean, I don't do it that much because 30 minutes at 300 is a big dive for us. We're talking of 4.5 hours. I look, my deco is a little more aggressive. That's probably a 4 to 5 hour runtime, which is big in that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
That's on the extreme ends.
Right.
I try to keep them to like 3.5 runtimes.
Right. And, you have a lot of environmental factors that can change in ocean diving than we would in the caves and whatnot. And so cool. Awesome. Yeah. Really good points and good, a lot to kind of mull over. The caves are nice because they're pretty stable sometimes. So a little bit different.
Yeah.
And Mario, so, kind of what's your take on the different transition gas, and how do you kind of configure your unit for how you're diving?
First of all, in both units, I have the same gas. So the units are identical in configuration and in gas. Then I have two plans. If there is a vertical and deep descent, I fix switching depth to check the unit, both the unit during the descent. And then in cave or reaching the bottom, I switch from the unit to other unit every 10-50 minutes. Of course, this depends of the task load or what I'm doing in the cave. About my switching philosophy, in normal condition, I switch directly from one unit to the other unit. As for open circuit regulator, so with the right training, every dive, it's a normal operation, easy to do. I have bailout gas only for real emergency. So in case of caustic or CO2 heat, then I switch to open circuit gas, and then I switch to the other unit, the working unit.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, very similar with the transition gas as well. And so another question that I have a lot is combining kind of manual CCRs with electronic CCRs, or utilizing dual manual CCRs. Tracking your decompression, as well as having a breathable loop in the other unit. Is the PO2 going to be too high? Is it, what are the kind of problems that you could encounter with swapping from a unit that you're on to a unit that's not actively kind of monitoring with the loop? Or do you have to, you obviously have to verify before you jump to the other loop. So kind of how do you handle that transition between the two units? Ed?
All right. So one of the things I've found is I run mine when I'm not on that unit. The Liberty, since it's the E, and the Sidewinder's the M. I run it in manual when I'm not on it as a bailout, or E, because there's nothing moving the gas. So if your solenoid fires, when you're breathing the loop, your PO2 will, when you're not, if the solenoid fires, it's just sitting there. and nothing's really circulating the gas. So when I have them switching, like this class was a group that I do a lot of work with. They were on the JJ Backmount and the Liberty Sidemount.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have them check their PO2 before the switch, make the switch, check the PO2 again, stow the other unit, and then check the PO2 again. And one of the skills is on that switch, the PO2 is too high. And on the dives, they actually found that happened more often than not, or more often than they would have thought. They just check it, it's good. They switch to it, breathe it a couple breaths, it's good. They stow, they check it again, and the PO2 is skyrocketing. So now you've got to fix that. So I prefer when I'm not on the E unit, manual mode, and if that's why if anything more than the depth change of around 10 to around 15 feet, I'm going to switch to that unit, equalize the PO2, and then go back to the unit I was on, or if the time is appropriate, I'll go ahead and stay on that unit. Some of our dives, like the stuff we're doing in the Bahamas, 4-hour dives, if you're not keeping those PO2s fairly accurate from unit to unit, then which one are you going to believe when you get back? Obviously, if they're off, you're going to have to go with the one that's got the most decompression on it to eliminate that risk or minimize it. But when we're doing 6, 7, 8-hour dives, going 15,000 feet back plus, you really need to keep them fairly accurate. The whole week and a half or so that Brian and I were doing those dives, and I mean, some of that was 35 feet down to 180.
Right.
So there was a lot of transition, and Brian was thinking, oh man, this might just take a really long time if Ed's got to switch all the time, and he found out that it but when we got done with really long dives, I would look, and one computer they were always within a minute and a half to 2 minutes of each other, and Brian was on his one unit the entire time, and I was always within a minute or two. So by doing that and keeping them accurate, especially on the longer dives, doing shorter dives, it's less important. Or if you're doing really deep dives, then you're very important. So I try and keep the units very close together for the PO2 just for decompression obligations.
So it sounds like you're kind of addressing it towards. Can you guys hear me all right? I know I wanted to switch spots on the screen. That's why I cut my feed. But it sounds like you're trying to keep kind of the units. You have to manage both systems. You have to manage both PO2s on top of all of the loop volume management, but addressing it with the particular dive. So, Tony, do you kind of experience the same things with a lot of the wreck diving?
Yeah. So both my
especially
units,
with two manual units. Yeah.
My primary unit is always whatever my primary is, whether it was dual side mount, dual side kicks or the classic kicks, is a metering valve with an unplugged first stage, so there's no depth limitation on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I control that there, and I run a nerd and a hand display that reads it live, knows the PO2, and then the backup unit has the same displays on it, but they're set on the computers are set at a fixed set point. So it's keeping the deco obligation the same as my live computers, pretty close, but you can still monitor PO2. And then when I switch over, if I have to switch over to that unit in a bailout scenario, once everything's under control, I can switch that to read the live PO2 for the deco to be a little bit more efficient, but it's not that big a deal. Same thing. So what I've come up with in the kind of my procedures of learning this, I started with the duals in 2013, and we're using it on every dive, 60-foot dives, because you just got to build. There's no procedures for this. I mean, like Ed said, he's been doing it 2 years with it. we had to figure this out. There was nobody to really bounce ideas off of. And kind of what my procedure is now is after I get ready to jump, my secondary unit gets filled with O2 completely, actually overfilled a little bit on the side kick. And then once I hit 30 feet, it goes down enough that I just manually hit the ADV, refill it. And then about every 100 feet after that, I just reach back as I'm like on the trigger and I tap it. More so because the speed, you know, you can be down to 300 feet in 4 minutes from the time you hit the water. I noticed the ADV, I'd get a little water intrusion. The ADV couldn't keep up with the scooter speed, manually going down. And that was part of the learning process there. I would take it apart after every dive, see what was going on.
So would that flood the unit completely, or just a little bit? Would that flood the unit completely? Or?
No, like, you know, maybe you'd get like half a cup, quarter cup sometimes. Not enough to affect the unit. It would still be usable. But as far as the gas mixes, I found that also by doing that, my dill was always, you know, like a 1050 or something high like that, that it'll crash just like when you do a descent on a 0.7, it crashes the PO2 in there. So it's breathable when you're on the bottom. You know, it might not be optimal when you first switch over, but it's breathable. A couple of shots with the manual injection of oxygen, you get it right where you need to be. I agree. I don't think, you know, me personally on the second unit, if it was electronic, I mean, I have experience with some electronic units. I just don't prefer it. I like the hybrid system if I were to probably do something on my primary, but the secondary, the gas isn't moving. So really, as long as you have the gas in there, you know, on the way down, your dill's breathable at the bottom with the PO2. On the way up, you know, you might have to, that's a little bit different. But, you know, again, if you have a breath in your lungs when you're transitioning over and you blow into that unit, that helps. Plus, it also gives you the idea, like Ed said before, if the unit's compromised, you know, you'll hear that noise. So that's kind of what I've, you know, come up with on my own for that. Again, you know, these wreck dives are very obviously square profiles for the most part. My procedures, if I was doing bigger cave dives consistently, you know, now I say I do some exploration stuff here and there, but it's a single unit type, you know, deal. If I was doing it more, my procedures would be different for cave diving, where kind of in line with everybody else I've heard so far is be switching back and forth, monitoring the second unit a lot more, just because the duration is so much longer. And you know, you want to keep that in check. It's not a stage bottle where you just hook it on and forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you set it and forget it. And you said that you're you have a nerd and you have a handset, so you have a live feed and then you have a fixed feed.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I had to find that out on my own because I asked Shearwater at the time, and they go, "I don't know if it can do that." So like, well, we're going to test it out on the dive, and you could run your cells, see your PO2s on your cells, but run a fixed deco on the computers at the same time. So it also gives me 4 systems of tracking my dive in case something went down, got ripped, whatever. You know, and then I had Mike. You know, it's funny. Ed said the gem first. I forgot all about that. My first unit was Mike saw me that, and I threw out the mouthpiece. He said, we had some holes drilled in, 3 sensors put in. I think the carriage now he's using actually came from stuff I was doing in Belize. We're doing like 4 hours, 5 hours swimming in like 80-some degree water, and the cells were in the triangle, and the condensation was actually filling up the cells. And at the end of the deco, they'd start cutting in and out. And I realized, I have now, I think they're in a carriage, and I could have them all facing down. So that way there's no condensation build up on the faces. So again, learning curves.
Yeah. I mean, you learn from doing and whatnot. Yeah. And so Mario, and kind of what's your thoughts? Well, at least with the 2 electronic units, you have the tracking is done pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yes, of course. For me, it's very, very easy. In fact, I had decided to come back on double side mount unit when Divesoft has started to product Bailout Rebreather.
Right.
In fact, using the feature of the unit with the standby mode, for me it's very easy to manage all the dive, because I simply switch from one mouthpiece to other mouthpiece, and then during the dive I just change the set point on both unit. So the unit will continue to have the echo calculation. This is very important for me in case of real bailout, to simply change the unit and continue the same dive and the emergency ascent with the unit identic to the other one. It's very easy to do this and to manage.
Right. You're just telling the other unit that, okay, one unit's on bailout standby mode and the other unit is the primary, and then you're just swapping between the two.
Because the switching operation is very simple. When I switch from the CCR unit to standby mode unit, just check on the handset, stabilize the loop, and I have seen that in near sensor box we have a gas cloud. But with adding diluent, it's very easy and fast to stabilize the loop.
Right.
Then I switch to the unit and set the unit on CCR mode, and then coming back to the other unit and put it in standby mode. It's
Right. So that's a good point, is that, the gas isn't moving, and so the mix that's at the sensors, is that the same that's at the mouthpiece, and so is that an issue that that's encountered often? But like you said, it's easy to fix. Just add a little bit of diluent, and so that's kind of
yes.
how you mitigate that.
It's very easy, because more or less taking breath from the master unit and use the counter lungs to flush the other mouthpiece and exhaling inside the other unit, you have a very quick loop stabilization.
Right. Okay. So, it's an interesting point, because we're seeing that with the electronic systems, there's not a lot. They're able to kind of move back and forth pretty easily. It's and then, kind of a more big picture with discussions like these are becoming more, or they're happening more and more. I know Ed and Tony, you guys said that you guys have been kind of doing this for a little while, and there was a lot of learning curve, and you had to learn through doing. Do you guys think that this is going to become more of a mainstream thing, where people are utilizing multiple rebreathers underwater? Is it going to be just a tool used for exploration, or do you think it will eventually be something that people will use recreationally?
In my opinion,
Yeah.
well, I think that probably dual rebreather, bailout rebreather, twin rebreather, it's necessary on deep dive or exploration dive, because it's necessary to have a continuous training on the unit, and all the dives must be a little training dive in the exploration too.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly what you were saying, Anthony. Yep, it's your primary system.
Yeah.
yes, I have spent about 13 dive hours just to reach the fine tuning set on both unit, and now it's very easy to manage it with muscular memory, with all the automatism. But I don't think that could be a recreational dive system.
Right, right. And so, Ed, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's like anything else. When somebody starts talking, especially on social, about something, then a whole bunch of people want to get.
Yeah.
The problem that I've seen so far is I've seen a lot of configurations people have. You know, there's people like Tony that have been doing this for a while for a reason, and he's been going through what he's learned. When I started, going through what I learned to do what I needed to do for the projects. But then I see people that are just not to offend people, but I guess I call them the look at me people.
Yeah,
and,
that's me.
and I've already seen, loops sticking overhead, crap hanging down. And I mean, Tony's been doing this a long time. So you got to be able to look at some setup that somebody's running and go, that's going to work. That's not going to work.
Right, right.
But there's going to be, I've seen a lot of interest in it already. We really didn't put out much of anything that I just finished the first dual rebreather class. But I've already had, a lot of people wanting this. I've had people wanting it that I know shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get people that are doing 5, 6, 7, 10 rebreather dives a year. Should they be on a dual setup? In my opinion, no. Is it going to be become something that's going to be recreational? Probably to a certain extent, but with anything, life, we all know that life is trade-offs. There is no free lunch. Whatever you get here, you gave up something over here. That equal and opposite reaction thing. So for everything that you can do, you have to ask, should I? Because it's a lot more complicated than people realize.
Yeah.
And when things go well, things go well. But that's not what training is all about. Training is about when things don't go well. Joe, I think you remember when we first had the talk, you were just starting out on the Liberty Sidemount Rebreather, and you said, how many dives should I do before I move to, and what did I tell you? 20,
It's the bad days. 25
dives down the main line of Jenny Springs or Jackson Blue is not experience. When shit,
right.
My bad. When things go wrong, that's experience. And then what happened on that dive?
Yeah, I had the prototype unit come apart.
The first thing you asked is, now do I have experience? And I said, yes, you do. So
there you go.
The thing is it's more complicated. There's things that the average diver, I think Tony said it best, that you're not just clipping on a stage bottle. You have another machine on you. When you switch to that one, even though, like I said, one of the drills is check the PO2, make the switch, breathe it, check the PO2, stow the other one, do whatever you need to do, set your computers, check it again. Because I've seen way too often that PO2 looks good. You breathe it a couple of times, it looks good. Wham, it's through.
It changes.
Or it's going towards hypoxic. So buoyancy on 2 units. People that still haven't mastered buoyancy on 1. When it comes down to especially smaller caves where you have less margin for error. So is it going to be? I think to a certain extent it is, because as soon as something new and controversial is out, you're going to have a bunch of people that want to jump on board, whether they should or should not. I guess they should ask, should I? But on the other hand, you have cost factor. People are just trying to figure out how they're going to pay for their first rebreather, let alone a second one. So
Right.
I think that'll stop a lot of people that think maybe I want to do that, but and also you need to be in the water a lot. When I first started doing it 3 years ago, for a project. We were going to go way back, and I was talking to someone, and they said, "Oh, well, I've only seen you the first couple thousand feet in the cave. What do you need dual rebreathers for?" I'm like, "Well, you got to get through all these learning trials and tribulations first. What did go right? What did go wrong? How do I perfect this? How do I make this trim out perfectly so I can fall asleep and wake up in the exact same position?" So I think it's going to grow, active, growing part of the community. I mean, I remember when Sidemount rebreathers first came out, we were at a try event, and I heard a lot of backmount rebreathers instructors saying, "You have to dive a backmount unit first. Sidemount rebreathers can never be your first rebreather." Now all those people are teaching Sidemount. Same thing when I started pushing Sidemount 20 years ago. People, "Oh no, don't listen to Ed. He's dangerous. He'll get you killed." So, and now Sidemount's been the fastest growing form of diving. So the Sidemount rebreathers are becoming more popular. A, you can get into more stuff. B, they make a much better secondary or redundant unit. I think it's going to gain popularity and momentum. How long that'll last, I don't know. But that's fine.
Right. It's a lot of really good points. Anthony, what are your kind of thoughts on the side mount rebreathers becoming more, or I'm sorry, dual rebreathers, bailout rebreathers becoming more mainstream?
So I don't want to get on a whole tangent of the training aspect, but unfortunately, I think because of social media and just the information that's out there, it's going to become more mainstream. I don't think it ever should be recreation at all.
Right.
But I had heard, Ed, that from a mutual friend, you did a class, and I was interested because at first I rolled because in my opinion, and kind of I think we're on the same line, is it does help with this learning curve, but when you're at the point that you need this, you really don't need a class for this. You should be efficient already. And it's one of those things is just, I need to take another class. I want to take another class. And, a lot of people have money and they don't want to wait and build up the experience. And like Ed was saying, like you could look at somebody and say, it's going to work. It's not going to work. But you also look at just normal rebreather divers and where they're at in their cave and even wreck diving on certain wrecks and these expedition type trips. And like these people shouldn't be here, but they have the money, they have the certs, but they don't have the time because the standards to get to the next level are not that long. You can in 5 years, less than 5 years, in 3 years, if you have the money and the time, you could have the top rebreather, trimix, CCR exploration cert. Right. And you need that. You need the time. It's good that you have that, and you could go to people like Ed that are instructors that also do the exploration, because that's the other thing. A lot of the instructors that teach some of this stuff, they just teach. Not that they're a bad instructor, but what they might be teaching and what works in a class won't really work 10,000 feet back in the cave or 300 feet in a wreck in the open ocean because they didn't have the fuck ups. Excuse my language. They just, and like Brett was saying, in the last time, in the last one, same thing. You don't know how you're going to react. You don't know what's going to go wrong until it goes wrong. So having that just experience in the water as a diver, then as a rebreather diver, it's funny about you can't go to side mount. I'm like, if you were a side mount open circuit diver and you want to transition to rebreather, why would you go to a back mount unit? They're there.
Yeah, completely.
But as far as growing and you seeing more people, one, you have companies, like Divesoft and there's commercially available units. There wasn't that. When I started, there was only this really the Flex, and then Mike came out with his that you could buy commercially, and I had built one that was similar to the Flex, and I forget his name now. Had one forever.
Bill Gambrill.
Down in Florida. What's that?
Wasn't it Bill Gambrill? Or you think
Bill had his, and oh man. He's got the white beard. I can't even think of his name right now. Anyway, he had a side mount rebreather for years. Forrest.
Forrest. Oh, yeah. Forrest.
I completely, I picked his brain apart when I was looking and looked at his unit. But the other thing too is people want it because, it's the new greatest next thing, the, most, okay, now I want to get this. But I mean, Brett said it, and even Steve, and I think Ed's probably in the same boat. It's only like diving it all the times is a pain. I only dive it when I need it. I haven't been on dual units at all last year because the dives that we were doing that were deeper, I only broke, we're in the 2 to 270 foot mark, maybe half a dozen times. I can strap 280s on me. For that limited amount, it wasn't worth doing it, especially because I wasn't consistent enough there. This year, I have I know one project that's going to require it. So when we start here, I'll start my 100-foot dives using 2 units just to get the muscle memory back and prep for a project that's 6 months away. But it's not something that I take on every dive. And even like Steve and Brad mentioned, they don't use it all the time. They use it. It's project and goal oriented. Right. It's not something, I'm going to dive it all the time. Because it's when you go from 2 back to 1, it's like going from a closed circuit rebreather back to a single tank. It's just simpler. There's less to manage. You just 1 unit, open circuit bailout, and jump in the water.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like stuff like this, I think, is awesome because it brings together people that have done it and you can learn. And I think, I don't know Edd personally. We met a handful of times. We have a lot of close mutual friends, and I recommended him for other courses to people. Like someone like that's doing it, and you help with that learning curve, but he can really, I know people that failed courses from him on other stuff and like, oh, he's so strict. You need that for this level because there's a lot that can go wrong. There's a lot to do just to go right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not one of those things. Everybody doesn't need it. And like Edd mentioned, like, what do you need it for? Like to go to the Hinkle? No. I mean, yeah, that was a big dive, but now, guys, I mean, for me to get there, I first got my rebreather, and how I gained hours was I got a season pass at Ginny and slowly progressively penetrated, swimming further and further. And then I swam to the Hinkle like 4 times before I even scooted back there. Now, for me, now it's okay. We jump on the scooters as a warm-up dive, but I see people that, certified not even a year, and they're past there, and you could see it in the caves. I'm sure Edd sees it up by him. I mean, granted, we all have fuck-ups. We touched stuff, we met, but you see some areas that were pristine less than 5 years ago that look like the beginning of the cave where they do training. And that's just because everybody wants everything fast now. And, usually you get people in it in 5 years, you never see them again. And that's, nobody wants to wait. And it's this, the caves aren't going anywhere, especially the wrecks. Yeah, they change, but take that time. It's a risk versus reward.
Right. There, yeah, a lot of points on that. Any thoughts?
They're all on their rush to the come to Jesus moment that's about to happen. That's generally what happens with the they're faster than everybody people that Tony was talking about. And that's kind of what I touched on. First part is there's a difference between what you can do and what you should do. And as far as the training aspect of it, I was kind of on board with what by the time you get to this level, you should. However, after 3 years of doing it for these long explorations and the things that have gone wrong, the things that I learned, that some of these things a lot of people won't live through. That's a fact. So in talking with one of the attorneys for the he said, and because the idea had been kicked around before DEMA 2018, I believe, and he said, I think it should be done, there's not going to be that many people that are going to do it. But a lot of these, why try and reinvent the wheel? So if you get a group like this, I've been talking Right Check a lot on this.
Oh no, looks like the audio is kind of going in and out.
Oh, is it fading again?
Yeah, the audio is kind of cutting in and out, and so we're kind of missing a lot of it. But try again.
So it was brought to me and asked me, would you go ahead and, because I had already started working on the class and the outline and what would be what kind of skills and drills would be involved. And during that first class, it was a group that they've been diving rebreathers for many years, and they have specific needs where they have to go a really long distance anyway. And they wanted this class, but they thought, don't we already know all this? And then when we got done with the 5-day class, they were like, wow, that was way harder than we thought. Some of this stuff we wouldn't have thought of until it happened. Hopefully you would. So, I was kind of up in the air for the several years that I was working on this class of whether it was really necessary. So I'm kind of with you on that, Tony. But if somebody needs to do that or wants to do that, should they try and reinvent the wheel? That's kind of what I touched on earlier about some of the people that are currently doing it and I'm seeing on Facebook, and some of their systems are a complete train wreck. So, when these things happen, are they going to survive them? Because with the dual liberties, you were saying everything's been going great, and that's fantastic that everything's going great. It's all about when things aren't going great, and when those do we survive them?
Right. I mean, it's a very much about when the days are, like we said earlier, we get the experience from the bad days, not from the good days. When everything's going good, it's going great. And so it's the necessity of the dual units. And there are people that they want to they feel as though they're getting rid of limitations when they're utilizing multiple rebreathers. But I know that we're finding a lot of limitations in other things. For example, the technology is becoming so much more robust than what it used to be. Electronics are a lot more reliable than what they used to be. So it's like the technology is very efficient and dependent. And then you have kind of manufacturers like KISS and Divesoft that are supporting the development of the technology and the infrastructure in that. And so it's like a different faceted. And so, we have experience level that's not, not everyone's experience level is catching up to the technology. And so they'll run into other limitations because we're not limited by the technology. We're limited by experience, limited by other different factors, even exposure, temperature limitations, and other scooter limitations if they're going in distance and whatnot. And so it's trying to find, people need to be, as divers and as a community, we need to be more well-rounded in terms of really only, basically riding the technology to the fringe of our experience level and going past that. Yeah. Sorry, a little bit of a word salad there.
No, I mean, it's the, to Ed's point, I think when I think of a class, I think, okay, the agency writes these standards, they're pretty minimal, and you get these people coming in where it's more of, I'm all for sharing what I've learned and ideas and doing that kind of thing. Like, it's not like, oh, well, it's a secret, only I can do it. But you have to, somebody that needs like that class, like Ed knew the group, they're already exploring. They've reached their limits of what their project goal is, and now they want to transition to something else. So it's great that you have Ed as a resource to go, okay, this is where we're at. Now we need to take that next step. And it's a jump start. So they don't have to wait 3 years to do what we did to figure it out.
Well, to go through the curve and whatnot. And
exactly. So, it's sharing that information. So that's kind of when my initial reaction when I heard the class a couple of days ago, I was like, but then, I thought about it. I'm like, if it's done to the point where it's more of a mentorship and the background of the group or the people that need it, And it's not just somebody that dives the Rex up here, just say, dives at Ginny, and all of a sudden they have their, they have a CCR, Trimix, DPV cert, Cave cert, and they're like, well, I want a dual rebreather now. It's like, well, are you at your limits of,
right.
You're only carrying 3 stages to go and do a cave dive. You're nowhere near your limits.
Right.
And are you towing dual? I mean, use Eagle's Nest as an example of deep cave. You can go to the end of the line with that with a single unit. And are you carrying dual scooters already? Are you doing those things before you add that kind of stuff to it? Now, Steve was doing stuff completely different where it was shallow, but it was logistically hard to get where he was going.
It was remote, right? Mm-hmm.
Reason to have it. But again, even after the class, like I started in the quarry and working my way up, and it's a slow progression because you have to be comfortable. And one of the other things I tell people, there's a lot of guys that talk to me and friends of mine that are back mount rebreather guys only. They never side mounted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and they're like the idea, and I'm like, well, you need to go for a year or two just using the unit as a side mount and learn how to side mount dive with the unit. Because
before doing the dives that you're used to doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not a stage bottle. It's different. And, Ed had said, like, you see online, people are trying to go through this curve, but you see also with just side mount online, these configurations, everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's like, it just has to be clean. There's reasons things are done a certain way. It's always the joke, you get, 10 side mount divers and there's 11 different ways to configure the gear kind of thing. Right. And it's just trying to be different. Or somebody mentioned in the last one, they use equipment as band-aids for skills. Or
yeah, that's a very good point.
To band-aid something where
skills problem.
Right. And so Mario, I'm really curious about your kind of background because a lot of this we're pretty densely populated here in Florida, and so but being in Europe and in Italy, kind of what's your experience in terms of getting to the level where people are utilizing dual rebreathers and whatnot? You said you started with a back mount unit, then went to having both side mount units.
Sorry, Joseph, I have understand.
Wait, so kind of talk about the kind of the growth that you went through to developing with dual rebreathers in Europe, because here we're very pretty densely here in Florida, and so
about my experience in training with dual rebreather.
Right.
Okay. As told, I had used dual rebreather in deep caves until 170-75 meters depth. But it was not easy to manage two rebreather with mCCR rebreather.
Mm-hmm.
Then I decided to stop to use a Bailout Rebreather, and then coming back to stage dive for deep cave diving. And then I decided to come back on dual rebreather idea when Liberty was available to do this in easy way. Of course, I have done some modification on my unit, on my both units, to have a very reliable system to manage in deep dive or long dive while using scooter DPV2. And if you want, I can show you the modification on the unit.
Right. So was it more through formal, kind of, we're getting some interesting points of like, at this level, we're experiencing more of formal training, but it's almost in the shape of a mentorship, where you go through the process, and basically, like Tony was saying, like Anthony was saying, was basically, so you don't have to go through the hard parts. You get to learn from the experience. That's what the mentorship will give you.
Nobody mentorship on me. of course, is necessary to have a very long and solid experience on a single unit. Then you can start to learn about how to manage, how to use, how to manage in emergency situation double rebreather. So actually, I think that in all over the world, there are very few people, very few divers with the right experience, which can teach someone how to use dual rebreather.
Right. So, I mean, it seems like kind of what we're going along the lines of where a mentor will have to kind of evaluate, just like a good instructor would, the student's experience that would want to start utilizing dual rebreathers. And like Ed and Anthony were saying, was like, why do you want to use this? What's your purpose? Are you exploring, or are you just going to be sitting at a reef at 60 feet, with just 2 units?
With 2 units, no. In my idea, it's not necessary to have a dual rebreather if don't need it, as Ed has told. It's and Anthony too. It's more easy to have a single unit with a classic bailout system, open circuit system. It's more easy for sure. Easy to plan, easy to manage, and of course, not all the people has the right mind to do double rebreather dives. So for me, is no sense to have recreational dives with 2 units. I have 2 units because I need to have 2 units, because I use 2 very performance unit, and so I can use it for deep dives and deep cave dives. But it's not necessary in recreational diving or in dive until 80, 100 meter deep. It's more easy to set an open circle bailout strategy.
Right. Well, great. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's extremely consistent with what we're all, what the consensus is. And so it's, I imagine it's just really the difference between, like, should you dive with a back mount with a side mount unit? Should you dive with 2 side mount units? Just those are kind of really the differences, and those are really dictated by the environments we're diving in, unless you guys see that there's kind of a major benefit to one configuration that you can still work with both.
I have decided to use double side mount configuration because I think that is the best configuration for deep cave dive, and it's very easy for me to manage the gas volume in the loop during the ascent, and while I'm using DPV. Of course, I have done little modification on both the unit to manage it in easy way, because probably one of the major issue in the use of twin rebreather is the management of the loop volume during the ascent, because you will manage 3 or 4 different volume, at least 2 loop volume and your buoyancy compensator, and for deep dives, of course, you have a dry sweet volume too to manage.
Right. All right. So, kind of on the kind of the last piece I wanted to get on or tap into today was, where I talked a little bit earlier about the technology kind of being extending the limits. What other limits are we running into now in terms of the type of diving that you guys are doing? And what are the other factors that are kind of limiting your dives? So, Ed?
Well, for the long dives that I'm doing, I mean, we're so far back now that I'm riding a scooter and towing two. And they're again kind of like dual rebreathers. That's there too. I'm going through really, really small stuff neatly and cleanly behind you. But we're, without a third scooter, we're just craft 1000s. We're going so far that you're going like your hair's on fire.
Can you say that again? How far, and kind of the numbers that you guys are going?
Around over 15,000 feet back. So you got some really small stuff along the way, and so you've got a scooter cleanly. There's bottle off restrictions. There's grinders. So my configuration has to be clean. Those two scooters have to be perfectly in my slipstream. It's just this particular setup works good for me. I've got to be clean. That's one of the things I found running dual side-mounted rebreathers was loop management, because I like to have the side-mounted unit. It comes across my chest and it goes over the ID ring when I'm not using that unit. That's kind of what I liked about the Sidewinder. When I'm done with that one, it tucks neatly under my neck. And then this one that's tucked over here can come up. When I had two, they were always in the way when I was. And taking both of them off to go through restrictions really wasn't as comfortable as I like. So I guess a lot of it is, back to what, I missed last week's episode, but like you were saying, environment and logistics. So where are you going? What are you doing? Why do you need?
Oh man, we're losing a lot of the audio now.
What all did we lose? Like I said, is it still cutting out, Joe?
Yeah, it's better now.
It's where are you going? What do you need? So for the amount of small stuff that occurs on our dives, it just has to be streamlined. So what do you need and what's the job going to require?
Right. I mean, good words on that. You have to stick with the fundamentals of keeping everything streamlined, keeping it robust. It can't make things worse, right?
Well, and if things are not neat and clean, that other unit, if it's not really stowed neatly and you're going through restrictions and you bump a DSV open, now you've got a destination unit that's going to be flooded when you get there. So there's a lot to it, and I think a lot more than a lot of people that are diving single rebreathers.
Right. They'll see a picture and they'll think, oh, they look simple. Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely mission specific as far as your setup and what's going to work. I think I could take mine and go do some cave stuff. There might be some tweaks, but like I said, my procedurals will be what my normal procedures will be different from if I were to say go down and do something down in Florida or whatever with two units. It's really, you have to think what your goals are with it, and then you might have to modify things. It's not I said it once, it's not a stage, it's not a cookie cutter approach by any means. Like, you have your base setup, but there's things you have to think of. And even on like the commercial units that you get, and that's kind of, in any commercial unit, when you're at that level, they're not standard, they're modified. If you're not used to modifying that and know how to, and even, the mindset of like, if you don't know how to take your unit apart and get in the wiring and troubleshoot things, you just send it back to a manufacturer. It's to me, you're not like at that level of the exploration side where you need it. You need to be mechanical, hands-on with it, and it's just, and some of the units, like Ed said, like, you know, you knock off the DSV and you flood your unit. When you're one rebreather, it's tucked in, you know, it's nice and clean. When you get the other one, and you got another stage bottle there, it could tweak it a little bit, that there's something you never would have noticed been an issue. You shear off or get stuck, or you're dragging through the mud.
Right.
You know, with it, what one thing I think, and it seems like most of everybody you had on so far kind of agrees, because there was the original, like the Prism, then there's the Meg conversions, is for the dual units or a bailout unit, having something that's independent, that's completely removable, is kind of the key now.
Yeah.
It's the standard that, you know, the Sidewinder, I like the unit. I never dove it. I know people that dive it. You know, guys that explore with it. For me, I thought it was too much to set up for something on the boat. I liked the way the sidekick was versus that. But I also wanted something I could take off, that I could use side mount only or as a backup. And, you know, Ed takes them off for like no mount restrictions, you know, bottles off, same thing. If I'm going into a wreck that's, you know, passageways, that's why I got away from dual side mount units, is they're, you know, they're hallways. So they're narrow and tall. So I'd have to be swimming sideways with the two units. And if this gets tight, that's why I also have the open circuit bailout about 10 minutes. You're not 10 minutes ever inside a wreck. You could scooter a wreck in 10 minutes. They're not that big, you know. So I can take the unit and leave it at a door or a restriction and go in on one unit, have my still redundancy in my open circuit bailout to get back to that unit where there's a problem, hook it up and go. And one of the other things that I've done it in the past, it wasn't a super emergency, but I handed off the unit to somebody else and they used it. You know, so.
And that's been something that a lot of people have talked is a, you know, it's an option that could be possible with a unit kind of like the Liberty Sidemount, where you could unclip it and remove it in front of you. So yeah, a lot of really good points on that. Well, great. You know, guys, we've kind of covered a lot of bases, and it's a lot to unpack. And so I thought we had a lot of really good points and whatnot. And so definitely we're finding that there's so much, there's a lot to unpack and factor in with diving with multiple rebreathers, because diving with a single rebreather is already a pretty complicated system, and then, you know, doubling it. And so it's very much, you need to have the proper experience, just like with any type of technical diving. And so the future of it kind of being recreationally dual rebreathers, I think, is still pretty far away in terms of what's needed in the community for terms of like training and like having the right experience for doing that type of diving. So, but I wanted to thank you guys all for, you know, joining in today for this discussion. You know, this is a second part of the 3-part series, and so it's all going to be building on itself. So thank you guys all for tuning in. I really loved having you guys on, and for all of you guys that commented and liked on the video, you know, thanks for you guys for your comments and whatnot. And so, yeah, next week we're gonna have the third part of this video series, and then we're gonna have some more guests on, and it'll be a good show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
All right.